The sun burned the desert until even the stones begged for mercy. Wind dragged waves of dust across a broken wagon lying half buried near a dry creek. Its wheel was split, its canvas torn like skin peeled from bone. Inside, a young woman lay twisted in rope. Her dress, once white, had turned the color of earth. Her lips were cracked, her skin blistered, and the rope around her wrists had carved deep, angry lines into her flesh. Flies buzzed in the heat, drawn by the salt of her sweat. She tried to lift her head, but the effort sent pain clawing through her throat. A whisper escaped, thin, hoarse, barely human. "Please, don't leave me here." No answer came, only the slow creak of the wagon's frame and the far cry of a vulture circling above. A half-empty water skin rolled beside her foot, leaking drops that vanished before they touched the sand. Each drop was a promise the desert swallowed whole. The sun climbed higher, and the light turned cruel. The air shimmered like fire. Her breath shortened, a fragile thread between life and the dust waiting to claim her. She closed her eyes, clutching at the small silver cross on her neck, the only thing left that hadn't been taken. Then hoofbeats, distant at first, then closer. A horse's shadow stretched across the sand. At the ridge stood a lone rider, Jack Harlow, hat low, dust-stained coat fluttering in the wind. A man who once swore he'd never stop for anyone again. He reined in, scanning the wreck. The sun glared off the metal of his rifle. He should have kept riding. He knew better than to care. But then he heard it, a sound too faint for the wind to have carried. A broken moan that didn't belong to the dead. He dismounted slowly, boots sinking into the hot sand. But she wasn't alone anymore. Before we find out what happens next, tell me, what time is it where you're listening from? And if you want to ride along for more tales of courage, subscribe now. Now, let's see what waited for them in the dark. Jack stood there for a long while, staring at the wreck. The wind carried the faintest sound, a breath, a moan, or maybe a prayer. He wanted to believe it was just the wind. It would have been easier that way. But when he heard it again, softer, weaker, he sighed, cursed under his breath, and stepped closer. The smell hit him first, sweat, rope, blood gone dry. Then he saw her. The woman from the wagon, eyes half open, lips trembling like she was still whispering to someone far away. He knelt beside her, knife drawn, slicing through the ropes that held her wrists. Her skin peeled beneath the blade. She didn't even flinch. When the last strand fell, she slumped forward, straight into his arms. Her head rested against his chest. Too light, too still, too human to leave behind. The silver cross around her neck slipped free, sticky with dried blood. It fell into his hand, and for some reason he didn't drop it. Jack looked around. The sand stretched for miles. No wagon team, no footprints but his own. Whoever had done this was long gone, or close enough to be watching. He hesitated only a moment longer, then lifted her onto his horse. "All right, girl," he muttered, "don't die on me now." He rode hard toward Dry Creek, a half-forgotten patch of land where no one came unless they'd lost something they couldn't get back. By the time the sun dropped behind the ridge, the sky bled gold and red. The horse stumbled to a stop outside his small cabin. Boards gray, roof patched with tin, a place built for ghosts and silence. He carried her inside, laid her on the old cot, and poured what water he had left over her cracked lips. She stirred, just enough to whisper one word that chilled him: "Hale." Jack froze. The name scraped like sandpaper in his mind. He'd heard it before. The Hale Brothers, ranchers turned wolves. The same men who burned his camp 3 winters ago, the night his brother never came home. He clenched his jaw, wiping the sweat from his neck. I should have kept riding, he muttered, though his hands betrayed him, already reaching for clean bandages, already soaking a rag in water. As he wrapped her wrists, the bruises glared up at him like marks of some old, familiar sin. And somewhere deep inside, the voice he'd spent years trying to silence whispered again. He had no idea that saving her would cost him everything. Clara woke to the smell of smoke and sweat. For a heartbeat, she didn't know where she was. The low ceiling, the rough wooden walls, not the barn, not the wagon. Panic surged before memory caught up. Her voice cracked, trembling. "Don't touch me!" Jack spun from the stove, hands raised. "Easy, you're safe. For now." She shrank against the wall, clutching the blanket like armor. The firelight made her eyes look fevered, not just from sickness, but from something deeper, fear carved into the bone. Jack turned back to his kettle. "Ain't no one here but me, and I don't aim to hurt you." He poured water into a tin cup and set it near her. "You can drink, or you can keep fighting the ghosts, your choice." For a long time, she said nothing. Then she reached for the cup, shaking so hard that half of it spilled. Outside, the night pressed close. Wind rattled the window shutters like knuckles on a coffin lid. Somewhere out in that darkness, a coyote cried. Short, sharp, warning. When dawn broke, Jack stepped outside to fetch water from the trough. The sand was cool under his boots, the kind that remembers every print. He stopped halfway to the well. There, fresh tracks, 4 horses, heavy riders, heading west. He crouched, fingers tracing the indentations. They weren't here last night. And one track cut close to the cabin before turning away. His gaze lifted to the horizon. Empty, but he knew better. The desert always looked empty before it killed you. Then he saw it, a piece of red cloth fluttering from a cactus spine, half buried in dust. He pulled it free. A handkerchief. Faded embroidery at the corner, the letter H. His stomach knotted. Hale. He folded the cloth and slipped it into his coat. Inside, Clara stirred. Her voice was rough when she spoke. "You shouldn't have brought me here." Jack stepped inside, setting the bucket down. "You'd be dead otherwise." She met his eyes. "They'll come for me. They always do." He studied her face, the bruises, the cut above her brow. "Who?" For a moment she didn't answer. Then her whisper cut through the room like a blade. "The Hales. They tied me to that wagon, said no woman runs from Hale blood." Jack froze, the name like poison in his veins. He'd buried too many good men because of that family. He turned away, jaw tight. "Then they'll have to ride through hell to take you again." She looked at him, eyes wet but fierce. "You don't understand. They already live there." That night, while she slept, Jack sat on the porch cleaning his rifle under the moonlight. The desert air carried the smell of dust and something else. Gun oil, maybe? Or the beginning of trouble. He could have left before sunrise, pretended none of this happened. But something in the quiet, in her fragile breathing from inside, chained him there stronger than any vow. The wind rose, brushing over the empty land like a whispering warning. He thought he'd saved her, but this was only the beginning of a darker fight. The third night came without stars. The desert was too quiet, the kind of quiet that means something is moving out there. Jack sat by the window, rifle across his lap. The lamplight trembled against the wall. Inside, Clara was finally asleep, though her breath still came ragged. The cross she wore glinted each time the fire shifted, the only steady light in the room. Then, a sound. Not wind, not coyote. Hoofbeats. Slow at first, then more. 3 horses, maybe 4, coming from the ridge. Jack rose, his jaw hardening. "Get up," he said quietly. Clara stirred, half dreaming. "What is it?" He grabbed his hat and holster. Trouble. Through the cracks in the shutter he saw them. 3 riders with torches, flames licking the wind. The orange glow crawled down the hill toward the cabin. Laughter echoed, rough, drunken, mean. "Hale's men," Clara whispered, voice thin. Jack took her by the arm. "Basement, now!" She hesitated. "If you fight them, they'll kill you." He looked at her, eyes cold. "If I don't, they'll kill you first." He pushed open the trapdoor in the corner, a dirt cellar lined with old crates and empty bottles. "If you ride with me," he said, "there's no turning back." She nodded once. Fear made her small, but something in her eyes, faith maybe, kept her steady. The first bullet shattered the window before the trapdoor closed. The lamp burst, spilling light and smoke. Jack rolled behind the table, cocked his rifle, and fired once. The report thundered across the valley. Outside, one man cursed. Another shouted, "Burn it down!" Flames caught on the porch, hungry and fast. Smoke poured into the cracks of the cabin. Jack kicked the door open and fired again, dropping a torchbearer off his horse. The other scattered, circling wide. "Jack!" Clara cried from below. He coughed through the smoke. "Out the back!" He yanked the cellar door open, pulled her up. Fire licked the rafters above. The air burned to breathe. They ran through the back door into the black desert, the heat chasing them like a beast. Behind them, the cabin collapsed in sparks and splinters. They mounted his horse, bareback, and rode into the night. Bullets hissed past like angry insects. Sand stung their faces. Clara clung to him, praying words he couldn't hear. The moon slipped behind a cloud, and the world turned red with the glow of pursuit. Hours later, they found shelter. The old mission ruins half buried in the dunes. Its bell tower was broken, but a single iron cross still stood against the stars. They stumbled inside. The air smelled of candle wax and dust. Shadows of saints flickered across the cracked walls as Jack lit what little remained of an old candle. Clara knelt near the altar, clutching her cross so tight her knuckles went white. Jack leaned against a pillar, pressing his hand to his shoulder. Blood seeped through his sleeve. She saw it and gasped. "You're hurt." He forced a smile. "Ain't the first time." She tore a strip from her skirt and bound his arm, hands trembling but careful. The candlelight trembled with her. Outside, thunder rolled. Not from the sky, from hooves. Jack's jaw clenched. "They'll be here by dawn." She looked up at the altar, at the cracked wooden carving above it that read, "God forgives." Her whisper was almost a plea. "Do you?" He didn't answer. He looked at his blood-stained hand, then at the pistol lying beside it. His reflection in the iron cross looked more like a ghost than a man. "Sometimes," he said quietly, "that's the hardest thing to believe." The wind screamed through the empty doorway, carrying the sound of approaching horses. Clara closed her eyes, lips moving in silent prayer. Jack chambered around, every click echoing through the hollow church like a vow. But the night wasn't done testing them. Dawn broke gray and hollow. The storm had passed, leaving the world covered in a film of dust and silence. Jack led the horse through the dry wash, boots sinking in the soft sand. The sky still smelled of smoke and rain that never came. Behind him, Clara followed, her steps uneven but steady. They'd ridden all night. Every bone ached, every thought felt heavy. And yet, something in both of them refused to stop. That thin line between fear and duty that keeps a soul moving. Then Clara froze. "Jack, look!" A few yards ahead, beneath a ridge of fallen rock, a man lay pinned beneath a sandstone slab. The horse nearby was dead, reins tangled, half buried in dust. The man's coat was black leather, shoulders broad, and stitched on the chest was a mark both of them knew too well. Hale Ranch. Jack's hand tightened around his rifle. Victor Hale. The eldest, the one who ordered it all. Victor's head turned weakly. His face was cut and burned, but the sneer was still there. "Well," he rasped, "the savior and his little stray." Clara stepped forward, eyes wide. "You left me to die," she said, voice trembling but strong. Victor coughed, blood on his teeth. "Shoulda stayed tied, woulda saved you the trouble." Her hand went to the pistol on Jack's belt before she realized it. He didn't stop her, not yet. She aimed it at Victor's head. The wind hissed between them like a breath held by the whole desert. Jack's voice was quiet, steady as the ground. "If you pull that trigger, you'll never heal." Clara's hand shook. "He deserves it." "Maybe," Jack said, "but you deserve peace." She stared at Victor, the man who laughed while she screamed. The man who treated mercy like weakness. Her finger tensed, then stopped. The pistol fell from her hand into the dust. Her breath broke with it. Jack stepped closer, looking down at Victor. "You hear that?" he said. "That's mercy. Hardest thing a man can fire." Sometimes mercy is the hardest bullet to fire. Victor's eyes flickered with hate or maybe shame before closing. Jack holstered the pistol, lifted the slab just enough to drag him free. Victor groaned, too weak to fight. "Why save me?" he muttered. Jack's answer came low. "Because I don't bury men twice." By the time the sun climbed high, they reached Rio Arriba County. The sheriff's office stood quiet, a weathered sign creaking in the wind. Sheriff Ortega, broad-shouldered and gray-eyed, stepped out to meet them. "Mornin', McCrae," he said, glancing at the bloodied figure slumped over Jack's horse. "Looks like you found trouble." Jack nodded. "Didn't have to look far." The sheriff's gaze shifted to Clara, torn dress, bruised face, eyes still burning with something fierce. "You all right, miss?" She nodded slowly. "I will be." They handed Victor over, shackled and silent. Ortega gave Jack a long look. "Not every man would have brought him in breathing." Jack shrugged, voice rough. "Wasn't for him, was for her." As the jail door slammed shut behind Victor Hale, the echo filled the small town like thunder after a long drought. Clara stood beside Jack on the porch, looking out over the dusty street, a street that, for the first time in a long while, felt safe. The light caught her hair, gold against the pale morning. She whispered, almost to herself, "I thought justice was killing the one who hurt you. Maybe it's just stopping the hurt." Jack looked at her, eyes soft beneath the brim of his hat. "Reckon that's justice enough." The wind carried the scent of sage and wood smoke, a reminder that the fight wasn't over, but for now it was quiet. And in that quiet, both of them finally breathed. Morning came soft over Dry Creek. For the first time in days, the wind was gentle, carrying not smoke, but the smell of wet earth and sage. The sun spread gold across the valley, painting over the ashes of what had burned. Jack stood outside his cabin, or what was left of it, half the roof gone, porch blackened, but still standing. He ran a rough hand over the wood, as if to say, "We made it through." Behind him, the sound of a kettle whistled. Clara stepped out with 2 tin cups, her hands still trembling a little, but steadier than before. Steam curled into the cool air. She handed him a cup. "It's weak," she said softly, almost shy. "Couldn't find much tea left." Jack smiled, eyes half-lidded beneath the brim of his hat. "Weak tea's still tea. Same with people." She laughed, a small sound, fragile but alive. The kind that didn't belong to the woman tied to a wagon days ago. They sat together on the porch steps. No words for a while, just the sound of wind in the grass and the slow breath of a world mending itself. Clara looked down at her wrists. The bandage is clean now, the wound's already fading. "You saved me," she said quietly. Jack took a sip, eyes fixed on the horizon. "No, you saved yourself. I just happened to be passing by." She shook her head. "You didn't have to stop." He glanced at her then, that same calm, steady look she remembered from the desert. "No one ever has to stop," he said. "That's what makes it matter." The words hung there, soft as the morning light. When the sun climbed higher, Jack rose and walked toward the edge of the yard. A plank of wood leaned against the fence, the old ranch sign, scorched but readable, WIN Ranch. He picked it up, dusted it off. "Guess this belongs back where it stood," he murmured. Clara joined him, helping lift the board. Together they hammered it into place, hands brushing once, just enough to remind each other they were still here, still whole. A breeze rolled through the valley, warm and clean. She smiled then, a real smile, unbroken, the kind that lights a person from the inside out. "You gave this place life again," she said. Jack looked at her, eyes gentle, voice low. "No, Clara, you just reminded me why I should try again." And for a long, quiet moment they stood side by side beneath the brightening sky. Two souls who had walked through fire, now finding peace in the morning light. The sun slid behind the far ridge, leaving the valley bathed in gold. The day had been long, but the silence that followed felt earned, like a prayer answered, even if no one had spoken it aloud. Inside the cabin, the kettle hissed again. Jack poured the last of the tea into 2 cups. Clara watched him, eyes soft, full of something that looked a lot like peace. He handed her the cup, their fingers brushing just long enough to say what words could not. Outside, the wind moved through the tall grass, whispering the same secret it had whispered for 100 years. Everything heals, given time. Jack leaned back against the post, watching the sun fade. "Maybe salvation doesn't come from miracles," he said quietly. "Maybe it comes from the quiet kindness we give to one another." Clara smiled, holding the cup close. The steam rose between them like a benediction. "If you were Jack Harlow that morning on the ridge, would you have stopped for the broken wagon, or would you have kept riding, telling yourself it wasn't your burden to bear? And if you were Clara Wynn, would you have chosen vengeance or mercy?" If this story touched your heart, please like the video and subscribe for more tales of courage and second chances. Pour yourself a cup of tea and tell me, what time is it where you're listening from tonight?